Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me for this presentation on genealogical records and historical evidence. One of the biggest misconceptions about genealogy is that it is simply collecting names and dates for a family tree. In reality, genealogy is a form of historical investigation built upon evidence, analysis, and context. Every document we encounter, whether it is a census, a birth certificate, a military pension, a land deed, or even a DNA match, represents a fragment of a real human life preserved through time. In this presentation, we're going to explore the major types of genealogical records researchers use, how those records are classified, why some sources are considered stronger than others, and how historians and genealogists carefully evaluate evidence to reconstruct the past responsibly. We'll also discuss the difference between primary and secondary sources, original versus derivative records, and why no single document should ever be interpreted in isolation. Understanding records is one of the most important foundations of good genealogy, historical research, and genetic genealogy analysis. Every serious genealogy project depends on records. DNA is powerful, but records provide names, dates, relationships, occupations, locations, and context that genetics alone cannot fully explain. Good genealogy combines many forms of evidence together. Primary sources are generally considered stronger evidence because they were created near the time of the event. Secondary sources are still valuable, but they may contain memory errors, assumptions, or repeated mistakes. Genealogists compare multiple sources together before reaching conclusions. Even when a record is primary information, the source itself may still be derivative. For example, an Ancestry index may contain transcription errors because it was copied from the original record. Whenever possible, researchers should examine original documents directly. Vital records are among the most important genealogical records because they directly document major life events. However, some information may still be secondary. For example, a death certificate may accurately record a death date but incorrectly list the deceased person's parents, because the informant did not know who they were. Census records are extremely valuable, but they are not perfect. The census taker may have spoken to a neighbor, spouse, child, or landlord, rather than the individual themselves. Ages and birthplaces often change between censuses. Researchers must compare many records together. In many regions, church records predate government birth and marriage registration. These records are especially important in colonial America and Europe. Witnesses and godparents can also reveal extended family connections. Land records are among the most underused genealogical sources. Families often transferred land between relatives. Neighbors listed in deeds frequently belong to the same kinship or migration networks. Probate records are often some of the strongest relationship evidence available. Will naming children can provide direct proof of family structure. Estate inventories also reveal wealth, occupation, education level, and daily life. Military pensions are especially valuable because applicants often submitted family evidence, affidavits, marriage proof, and witness testimony. These files can span decades. Immigration records help bridge research between countries. Naturalization files may contain photographs, signatures, and exact birthplaces. However, ethnic identity labels in records may change over time due to politics and language barriers. Newspapers are excellent contextual records. Obituaries can identify entire family networks, but details still require verification, because reporters relied on information provided by relatives. City directories are especially useful in urban research. They can track families year by year between federal censuses. Tax lists can also place individuals in a location long before census records existed. Court records often contain highly detailed testimony. They can provide insight into ordinary people who otherwise left little documentary evidence. A gravestone may have been created years after death by descendants who did not know exact dates. Researchers should compare cemetery evidence with additional records whenever possible. DNA is not a replacement for records. Instead, DNA works best alongside documentary evidence. Strong genealogy combines genetic evidence with historical documentation and critical analysis. Good genealogy requires source evaluation. Even primary sources can contain mistakes. Researchers compare many independent records together before forming conclusions. Genealogy is not simply collecting names on a tree. It is the reconstruction of human lives within historical context. The best genealogists think like historians, detectives, and analysts simultaneously. The deeper we study genealogical records, the more we realize that every document represents a real person navigating a real historical world. Our responsibility as genealogists is to reconstruct those stories carefully, ethically, and honestly. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation on genealogical records and evidence analysis. In future videos and presentations, we'll continue exploring genetic genealogy, historical records, DNA interpretation, migration studies, Native American genealogy, historical methodology, and responsible research practices. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, subscribe, follow, and share.